Welcome, folks, to another edition of Heavy Hands. I am your host, Connor Rebush. With me, as always, is Phil McKenzie.
Oh.
There he is, folks. Fan favorite, Phil McKenzie. Even when he isn't being monosyllabic, his mic makes him monosyllabic. I don't know if you're aware, Phil, but all I really heard was, low.
Wait.
Yeah, wonderful. Welcome to the show, everyone. We have some big fights to talk to you about. I guess we have to eat some crow again, Phil. I mean, we were wrong again, and
Full of crow. I don't want more crow.
from what I understand, we have to rend our clothing and apologize to Leon Edwards, to Mrs. Edwards, to essentially all of Birmingham. That's where he is, right? Birmingham? Manchester. Birmingham. Which one? Birmingham. Okay, great.
Birmingham.
Anyway, I do feel that, before I get into opinions and sarcastic apologies, Leon Edwards Kamaru Usman 3 took place at UFC 286. Justin Gaethje and Rafael Fiziev had a fantastic co-main event fight. No surprise that was awesome. Next week we have the stellar bantamweight main event of Chito Vera versus Corey Sandhagen. The rest of that card is relatively thin, but as Phil and I were just discussing before we began recording, we will take a shitty undercard if you stick some great bantamweight contenders on top of it. Like, much harder to complain when you go through this whole undercard and you know that you're not just looking forward to, Anthony Smith. So
Also, the tense, bullet-dodging feeling of looking at Holly Holm in the co-main event.
Oh, yes.
Thinking of what could have been. Because Diaz, some Anthony Smith-esque main event properties, does Holly.
That's true. Yeah, and with her, it's almost more justifiable, because I think the people actually did like the Holly Holm main events for some reason. With Anthony Smith, it's not clear that anybody wants it, except for the UFC. At least people, that Ronda Rousey win gave Holly Holm a lot of inertia among the fan base.
Seemingly infinite, yeah. Still remember hearing people
Yep.
lustily cheering her after her second round of holding Raquel Pennington just up against the fence.
Yep.
Thinking there's literally not a level of boring you could be.
Mm-hmm. They loved
make
it.
them not love you.
They loved it. It's not clear how anyone feels about Anthony Smith. More that he's just available, I guess. But anyway, we're not bitching about those things. We have nothing to bitch about. We had UFC 286, and it was Leon Edwards, Kamaru Usman, and this is my favorite kind of prediction to get wrong, Phil. Because I feel like I understood the matchup pretty well, despite having picked the wrong fighter. And the thing that my prediction hinged on was that basically I didn't pick Leon Edwards because I didn't think he was going to do what is ultimately a very simple adjustment to take advantage of, his own physicality and maybe Usman's increasing unwillingness to pressure. A very straightforward tactical adjustment that I thought psychologically would be a massive hurdle for him to clear. And so not only am I pleased that I feel I sort of understood what the pivot point of the matchup was, but I'm immensely pleased that Leon Edwards overcame a massive mental hurdle to prove me wrong. There is nothing I like seeing better than a fighter who appears for their entire career to have been hampered by a very specific, psychological hang-up, just saying, fuck it. I'm not afraid. I'm not uncomfortable. If I am uncomfortable, it's meant to be this way. I'm going to go out there and challenge myself. There was no complacency from Leon Edwards. This was a fighter who got better and achieved something new after winning the title. And that is so exciting to me. I was so happy to see Leon Edwards put on such a wonderful, consistent performance. I thought he killed it. I thought this was far and away the best Leon Edwards I've ever seen.
Absolutely. I mean, and it's in such a different direction to what you would even expect from someone who's just, won the title. Talk so much about how fighters tend to become more conservative, more risk averse once they get the title for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
We have, for example, Kamaru Usman. But, this was his most assertive performance. It wasn't necessarily aggressive, but just in terms of his cage positioning and his willingness to meet Kamaru Usman on his own terms, 100% all of that. And that's, as you said, this is one of the ones where we got it wrong in terms of who was going to win, but in terms of the dynamics of it, I was pretty happy because, we said, one of the first things we said was like, shouldn't discount Leon Edwards' ability to win rounds in this fight.
Mm-hmm.
The last one was going to be a 48-47 without the finish. And, and we said that there were two things that, what both of them needed to do is that Usman needed to step on the gas and just never let Leon Edwards off. And Edwards needed to hold the center of the cage and essentially just win striking exchanges rather than getting backed into the fence and getting pushed into the clinch outside of his own terms.
And that is really all it took. You say it's not aggressive, but just presence and posture. Mm-hmm. This was a very aggressive fight from Leon Edwards. It was just much harder to convince him to give ground. And I thought he did a better job in how he chose to retreat. I thought he was a lot quicker to move laterally. I mean, I criticized him, not incorrectly, I still feel, in the article I wrote last week for the manner of his lateral movement. And that he is, like so many MMA fighters, really, really averse to pivoting and actually gaining ground even as he's changing angle. He tends to do the, long loping Alexander Gustafsson style sidesteps along the fence, which against a good pressure fighter just leaves you basically permanently cornered because you're always drawing a less efficient circle than your opponent who's closer to the center of the cage is, and they can just stay in front of you. Still a lot of sidestepping, but the fact is, he did not do very many, if any, of these straight linear retreats that got him into so much trouble last time against Usman. He was less willing even to go to the lateral movement. He just stood his ground a lot more, and he actually did hit some nice pivots because of that. Some Jose Aldo style pivots, because he would stand his ground, force Usman to make a decision to commit and step in. And there were a couple times where he slipped and pivoted and just spun Usman. Very, again, Aldo-esque. He was just a lot more assertive. And, it seems like such a simple solution. But again, I think it's just fundamentally very difficult and must have been very difficult for Edwards to do that. And so I can't say enough good things about the discipline and poise that he displayed in this fight. It must have been not fun, but the last fight wasn't fun either. At least in this one, he got to feel like he was in there competing the whole time. I think you could argue he picked up, several people have, including I think one of the judges, that he picked up 4 of these rounds.
When I saw it, I thought he might have won all 5.
Yeah, honestly, even Usman's best rounds were
the one of the point deduction.
Yeah. Usman's best rounds were not clear at all. They were still super competitive, even when Usman was doing his utmost to ramp up the pressure and stay on Edwards. Edwards was at least making it seem very 50-50 and giving him one shot for every one he had to take.
Yeah. And the other side of Edwards having the great strategy and the great performance is Kamaru Usman.
Yeah.
Because this did sort of, if less extreme, this did remind me of Brandon Moreno versus Davison Figueiredo 2.
Mm-hmm.
One of the guys came out and did almost everything you would want him to.
Mm-hmm.
The other guy, not.
Yeah.
I think what made this one surprising is, as we said at the end of the episode, Usman might have moved more towards being a sort of mid-range striking type, but is at least in him to consistently pressure, consistently work his game. Whereas Edwards has never shown the inclination to hold his ground in the way that he needs to.
Right.
That's what made this so impressive. It's also, and that's what, basically informed our pick at the end of the day. But this was not a good performance from Kamaru Usman.
No, I have to agree. I will say having 2 Trevor Whitman fighters on the card, and I was having the feeling going into this fight just based on that performance from Justin Gaethje, I was like, man, it is just impossible to ignore now how consistently Whitman's fighters, even when he's telling them to pressure. I don't know that Whitman is aware of how he has mechanically stripped that out of his fighters. But he was telling Gaethje to pressure, and Gaethje just couldn't do it. At least Usman, who I think is more of Gaethje, you could argue, was never really a pressure fighter as much as he was a brawler. Usman at least did respond when Whitman was demanding that he stay on top of Edwards and pressure, but it was not the kind of pressure we used to see out of Usman. And part of that has to be credited to Edwards just being monumentally harder to run over and back up. He just did not answer to the sort of gestures of pressure fighting the way he used to. But I think it took a lot less than it would have in 3 years ago to persuade Usman to kind of let up and go back to long range.
There was a moment, I think, in round 2 where Usman landed a right hand on Edwards. And then you could see him briefly, as sort of Gaethje did in the previous fight, wake up to who he was. Then suddenly after that, he was chasing Edwards around the cage. He was getting in on him. He was working his body shots. Is weirdly something which has disappeared. A big part of the first Covington fight, and the second to some extent. A big part of the Edwards fight, the first one.
Mm-hmm.
This was nominal pressure fighting without any of the the tools, any of the corralling weapons, any of the ability to attack anything but the head. It was one of Usman's most headhunty performances.
Really?
And partially, I think it's because, however much he said it, that head kick was just in his head the whole time, so to speak.
Sure.
Was just getting frozen up by hit feints right from the beginning. Obviously, the amount of body and leg kicks that Edwards landed was quite something.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I just think he was sort of constantly second guessing himself to some extent. I do think the low kicks, again, this was something we sort of recommended for Leon to do before the first fight, but he really went for them this time, and I think they were really paying dividends by the end of the fight. But I liked seeing it because it's such a counterintuitive approach against a wrestler, and it's always something that I like to see.
Mm-hmm.
Ever since Rory against Damian Maia, because it shows not just an awareness of the ability of the fact that you want to trick your opponent, and if you take away his legs, he'll be less able to shoot and all that kind of stuff. But a recognition of what kind of wrestler you're up against. Usman is not going to be shooting in open space, as and nor was Maia. Not really. He was going to shoot, but it wasn't going to drive you off your feet after a low kick. That wasn't how Damian Maia shot his takedowns.
He's not just going to snag an angle and run over you like a freight train.
Yeah, and he could do that pretty much whenever. But so it made a lot of sense for both Leon and Rory to build up that attritional supply of damage over the course of the fight. I thought it was very smart that he kept going to it. It wasn't just the it wasn't just the fact that he was getting free low kicks because Kamaru Usman was scared he was going to boot him in the head again.
Yeah.
But yeah, I found it a very concerning performance from Usman, frankly. I mean, ironically, he displayed, I think, the most was freakish physical toughness.
Yeah.
Because honestly, that was what I think kept this fight even visually somewhat close.
Mm-hmm.
Because Usman was taking horrific shots at times.
Yeah, and let's not forget that Edwards is a serious, powerful. He's a power hitter. And the only reason he hasn't been knocking more people out throughout his career is the lack of assertiveness and combination striking, and the sort of predictability of both his pace and his weapons. But Edwards, I mean, he landed, according to the official stats, 120 significant strikes. Super high accuracy too, 74% accuracy.
Jesus.
120 of 161. And just to back up what you were saying before, a large part of that, because he's about 50-50 on his head strike accuracy, a large part of that accuracy is that he landed 36 of 39 body strikes and 50 of 53 leg kicks.
My God.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, and you saw some of those body strikes. The body kick in round 2 that pretty much took Usman off his feet.
Yep.
That huge knee in round 2.
Yep.
It's like very clean left hands, and like honestly, what was keeping Usman, as I said, what was keeping Usman in this fight, and what made it look close to people. I didn't think it was particularly close, really.
I agree.
Was just his ability to absorb damage, and that is in and of itself somewhat concerning.
Yeah,
because because once that kind of tribute goes, you're in serious trouble.
Yeah, very much so. Now, I still think, I think that like physically, toolkit wise, Edwards is a step above most of the welterweight division. Like, for all that we critiqued him for like never being assertive, I was, in writing that article, I did go back through a lot of Leon Edwards' UFC fights, and there are actually instances where he's like, for him, hyper aggressive, and it's always against like Bilal Muhammad. You know what I mean? Like someone who's just
a brief spurt against Brian Barberena.
Yeah, at least that one he was very much like holding the center for a lot of the fight. It was that one, the Bilal Muhammad one, and what was the other one where he was shockingly aggressive? But there were a few, but they were all notably, not as physically potent.
Classed.
Yeah, they couldn't out wrestle Leon, and they were not physically competitive with him. And the thing is like, that's a lot of the welterweight division. Like, the welterweight division is not fully stacked with athletes either on the level of Edwards or Usman. So I'm not going to write Usman off as not being able to get any more wins because of this.
Yeah, for sure.
I think it's somebody who is on his tier physically, who is also, again, putting on a career best performance. And as concerned as I was about Usman, I do really want to emphasize, like, just looking back at those numbers I quoted, like, this was Edwards just fucking taking it to him. And just making him pay constantly. And something that I really loved seeing, is that because he was so determined to stand his ground and not let Usman back him up, this is the first time where Edwards actually looked like a counterpuncher. Like, you know what I mean? There's so many MMA fighters where because they're low output, fans just call them counterpunchers. And Edwards is not often really a very good counterpuncher. He usually has been a pretty poor one, actually, who will like land some surprising counters and then people kind of figure it out. This is one where like, Usman had to cross that bridge to get into range with him. There were a lot of nice pull counters in this fight. The counter knees as Usman crashed into him, like a lot of good answers because he was keeping his feet and staying in range after the first strike was fired. But it's as with most things like this, it is a bit of one and a bit of the other. You can't look at this and say, this is the Kamaru Usman who won the title. But, who knows how good this exact Kamaru Usman might have looked if, they threw him in there with fucking Jorge Masvidal again, right?
Yes, I'm sure he would. Yeah.
He would still thrash it.
I don't think there's a significant difference between this Usman and the one we've seen for the last couple of fights, but it is bringing it out how dangerous this approach and how I think, well, it's not necessarily that he's in trouble. He's now lost his belt and he's not getting back to it anytime soon.
Right.
But, it's just things that we've been talking about really coming to the forefront.
Yeah.
And as said, drawn there by a most perfect performance from Leon Edwards, the kind we've never really seen from him before.
I don't think he could do
against people that he outclasses.
Yeah.
He always takes his eyes off the road at some point.
Yeah.
Lost the 5th round to Donald Cerrone, did he not?
Yeah.
Cerrone, man.
Let's not forget he almost got KO'd by fucking Nate Diaz in the 5th round. Like a shop-worn, just washed Nate Diaz. He got dropped in round 2 by Brian Barberena. Way back in the day, he got crushed in the 2nd round very soundly by Albert Tumenov and was really on his way to losing the fight if not for a crucial scramble in which he snatched a choke. Like, this has been such a consistent part of Leon Edwards' approach to fighting. That is why, yes, this is a continuance of a gradual decline from Usman, but a massive corner turned by Leon Edwards. I would love to think, there is part of me that is still concerned that this is just like his familiarity with Usman, the confidence gained knowing that he can knock this man in particular out. I'm very curious to see how Edwards looked against a different opponent next. That different opponent who is, for the moment, apparently Colby Covington.
Much has been made of the altitude thing. Gilbert Burns, there's a video of him talking about it. He's like, talking about it before the fight. He said, he thought Leon looked really good in round 1, then he was clearly having some problems with the altitude and so on. He thought he was having problems with the altitude following that. And Gilbert Burns actually just picked him based on that. And he was like, it's going to be tough for Kamaru Usman to come out, come out first and then wait for Leon, and it's going to be hostile territory and so on. And hopefully this is, because the first round of their first meeting was very good for Edwards. Hopefully it's a combination of those things.
Yeah, it was good, but it still wasn't good in the way that this was good.
No, it wasn't, was it? It's been such a weird journey with Leon Edwards.
Mm-hmm.
He started off as like a KO artist and then became this weird grappler, then slowly sort of synergized together like little pieces of his game from elsewhere. He's been so cool to watch and yet so frustrating that this was because so few people become that, start off especially as, like a British striker, and then become that well-rounded in that many areas. Yeah. While still remaining that frustrating. That it was amazing to watch him, put it all together like this.
It was a beautiful payoff to all the frustration he's put me through.
Yeah.
Cause this is just what I needed to see. This is why I was frustrated. I'm like, you can do a fight like this, man. And I've never hated him for it because those psychological hangups are real. Just to say that they're psychological doesn't make them any less innate or difficult to overcome than an athletic ceiling. It was a ceiling inside his head, but it was still a very real ceiling. And, he fucking crashed through it finally. And, that's why I'm not like, oh, you could have been doing this all along. I'm like, clearly this was a very difficult thing to achieve. It took a long time and a slow build of confidence and a lot of experience, but he did it, man. I'm very proud of Leon Edwards. I don't mean to sound condescending. I'm very proud of this performance. It makes I feel good for the guy.
Yeah, there's been tons of it's up through the years where he's been faded. It was never anyone's favorite fighter, or well, he actually was for a certain
bunch of
class
nerds.
Of nerd. He was perhaps the least promoted, very good British fighter that we've encountered.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great.
And now he has, really proved that like he fucking earned this title, man. This is the performance I needed to see.
Yeah, in reference to what you said about the unfortunate and despicable chance of a Covington title shot. Yeah. I mean, I respect that. I'm going to respect that Leon's
response
just been like,
yes.
No, I'm not fighting him.
Yeah.
I'm going to choose to ignore that he's saying that because he's hoping that Jorge Masvidal beats Gilbert Burns.
Yeah. No, I hope he sticks to his guns. I mean, I don't know what kind of leverage he has. The really crazy thing is that it seems pretty obviously like some sort of like backroom deal that like, cause Dana White's like, oh, Colby deserves it. And like, I don't think he's being completely full of shit. I think he really thinks Colby deserves it. And I think that's because, Colby agreed to be the short notice fill-in. And
and because,
I suspect
Usman Covington apparently did 700,000 buys.
Well, yeah. And I suspect that, Dana probably promised him the title shot for being the replacement fighter for this event.
Yeah. I mean, Kamaru Usman did the same thing for, whoever it was. Woodley Maya? Remember.
Did he get a title shot for that?
Yeah.
He was the next one?
Yeah.
So, but it is like, there's always this uneasy balance between like actual sport and ticket sales. And like, yeah, it's obvious why there are multiple factors that have nothing to do with sport that put Colby Covington at the top of the heap. But I even more respect than I gained from Leon Edwards from this performance, how just sort of blithely he just like no-sold Colby Covington's presence.
Yeah.
They brought him there. He's there acting like a fucking asshat at the side of the cage, and Leon's like, no. Like, Colby was fully expecting to get in the cage and have some kind of incredibly embarrassing trash talk with Leon. And they had to like shoehorn in a backstage segment where Colby talked to Megan O'Leary because Leon was just not interested. Again, now the second coolest thing I've seen him do. We will see what happens.
Yeah. I will say just a couple of thoughts on it. Punch people be like, can Colby Covington do that Usman couldn't? There's a few things I think there's a couple things to say, which is basically that like Colby is like people are like, oh, he's going to be a more insistent pressure fighter and so on. There's no indication that he is that anymore either.
Yep.
Unless forced into it.
He did it against Masvidal, who, which was a good sign for Colby. A Masvidal who really did the like classic Leon Edwards thing. They have similar flaws of just backing himself into the fence and basically insisting that Colby pressure wrestle him. If Leon can replicate this, I'm not at all certain that Colby is going to insist on pressuring any better than Usman did, if not worse.
No, that's exactly what I don't expect. Covington has looked okay pressuring people who, as you said, have absolutely begged for him to do it.
Yeah.
Namely Woodley and Masvidal. And it hasn't been like, man, this guy is, a relentless savage in there. And against Usman, he looked frankly terrible for at least 2 rounds before he just went crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there's that. I think that's really, I don't really expect him to actually look that much more insistent than Usman when it comes down to it.
Mm-hmm.
I think the main thing is just that he's more of an active jabber from southpaw. It's going to be more of a close stance fight. I still think Leon Edwards is quite jabbable. It's also just going to lead to him getting his lead leg kicked out a bunch.
Leon has also fought a shocking number of fellow southpaws.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, he's fought a ton of lefties.
not very many super jabby ones. I mean,
It's true.
Covington does jab a lot, but yeah, I think he'll just get his complete leg kicked out for doing it a bunch.
Yeah. And I
so yeah,
don't think it's
initial
at
thoughts.
all certain that he can out-wrestle Leon, even if he does get him pressured against the fence, because Leon's actually a very good wrestler, as we know.
Yeah, his wrestling was very good in this fight.
Absolutely.
As was his ability to keep scrambles going once he was down.
Yeah.
Because that is where Kamaru Usman is much better than Colby Covington.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, Colby's much more of a rinse and repeat artist against comparable wrestlers and comparable athletes. Or superior athletes, as Leon definitely is. So yeah, I have faith in this version of Leon Edwards. I'm still curious. Again, how much of this was maybe specific to this matchup, but such an amazingly good sign from a guy that I long ago really gave up realistic hope in being able to put on a performance like this. And he passed that test with, I can't say enough good things about it. It was the best Leon Edwards performance I have ever seen by so many metrics. He looked phenomenal. All right. Well, let's take a break. When we come back, the co-main event, another fighter ruined by Trevor Whitman. Justin Gaethje fought Rafael Fiziev. You want to talk about a guy, we had Makwan Amirkhani on this card, and Fiziev should be grateful for that, because that is the only guy here with a more comically consistent tendency to do really well and then just sort of look miserable all of a sudden. So, Gaethje, Fiziev, and then Vera Sandhagen after this.
Hey everybody, thanks for listening to this week's Heavy Hands. If you like what you hear, please consider pledging to support the podcast on Patreon. Patreon is basically continuous crowdfunding. You sign up to contribute a certain amount per month to help us with production costs and the like, and in return you get rewards ranging from a mention on the Heavy Hands website to a question or topic of your choice being discussed on the show. We have a lot more in the works to reward you for your help, and we appreciate every contribution. No amount is too small. Just head over to patreon.com and find how you can help out the only show dedicated to the finer points of face punching. Now let's get back to it.
All right, welcome back to Heavy Hands. We're talking about the co-main event now of UFC 286. Phil, I've been talking too much. Why don't you lead us in?
I mean, I guess the narrative of this one was always around the idea that Fiziev was going to win round one.
Yeah.
But there was a decent chance that Gaethje was going to win round three.
Yeah.
And yeah, those are the two things that happened. And I think it was Gaethje did better than we thought he would.
Mm-hmm.
But it all really comes down to the second round. Like the question of, who actually won that one. And this was another one of those spots in the card where I was like, oh, no, they're not scoring bodywork.
Mm-hmm.
Or like as it was sort of in the main event. I sort of felt like Rafael Fiziev might have still won this fight.
Yeah, I did too.
Not in a way which I felt was super meaningful.
No, it didn't feel like a robbery. I mean, and if you're going by pride rules, which the judges apparently were, then Gaethje was there at the end, and Fiziev was miserable. His face was fucking ground beef. He was dead tired, and Gaethje, it was clearly his best round of the fight, not only in the success he was having, but how he was finding that success. Like, it was his cleanest round. It looked like the kind of performance he could have replicated going into a hypothetical fourth round. He looked really sharp.
Yeah, that's basically it, is that...
But the scorecards were fucky. They were weird. Like, only one of them
gave Gaethje a 10-8?
Someone gave him a 10-8 in a round in which he was visibly rocked twice in the first minute. Yeah. That was weird. I mean, without those moments, I would maybe be pretty understanding of that being a 10-8, because Fiziev was having a miserable last couple minutes in that round. But only one scorecard gave it 10-9, 10-9, 9-10, which I thought was the correct score of the fight.
Yes, that is my score. as you said, like, and also this is sort of a de facto title eliminator, I would assume. You know, the agree with Andler and McGregor or whatever, welterweight aside.
Yeah.
And those should be 5 rounds for good weight classes. They should be 3 rounds for bad weight classes. But, yeah, so it should have been 5 rounds, and Gaethje probably would have won.
Mm-hmm.
So I found myself thinking, you know, what is it with Rafael Fiziev? You know, firstly, it was the fact that he racked up so much bodywork, and it's the one of the, you know, not the first time he's done this.
Mm-hmm.
He racked up tons of bodywork to no visible effect other than tiring himself out.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think this probably does come down to the fact that he seems to largely connect with his feet rather than his shins when he is kicking the body. But even then, it was like a bunch of teeps and front kicks. You know, for whatever reason, he just doesn't seem to be able to out-attrit a lot of opponents, and that includes, like, Chikese.
Yeah. That is a weird thing. I mean, I've seen plenty of people get fucked up with the toes on a body kick. Like, it was surprising. I thought he made a lot of the right decisions in the early going, and it just did not have the effect that, like, Eddie Alvarez's stabbing bodywork did on Gaethje. Not even close.
Yeah. I mean, that was one of the things. And I found myself thinking, you know, why does he tend to fade out of the fight, like quite like he does? And in some ways, I feel like he is the anti. He has the opposite problem to, like, Robbie Lawler, and it kind of bites him in the opposite way. Because Robbie Lawler, one of his issues is obviously that he would take big like time out to recharge in fights.
Mm-hmm.
Robbie Lawler is fighting a very complicated kind of fight, and would need to just take time to recharge his batteries, where he would do nothing, or block, and just wait.
Yeah.
And Fiziev is incapable of doing this. He is fighting the most complicated, difficult kind of fight he can, where he's going to be, you know, he's not going to be establishing things with the jab. He's going to be trying to slip things with very small margins of error, coming back with, like, combinations, working punches into kicks. He's trying to, you know, keep a sort of 3-dimensional striking game going all the time.
Mm-hmm.
He can't let exchanges go. He can never have a neutral exchange, a neutral or even a mildly losing exchange, without trying to get it back.
Yeah, I think you're onto something there. He does not know how to buy time.
No. Yeah. He's never really happy just to use his defense. I mean, because this is such a bizarre thing, because, you know, it goes to show how much an element which is a positive can be a negative in another light, because so much we talk about is, like, MMA fighters whose defense is only good in, like, neutral space. Fiziev could honestly do with more of that.
That is a very interesting point. I think, yeah, I
could honestly do with like, just sometimes just thinking, I'm going to slip some punches and I'm going to move away and make the other guy miss. I'm not going to try and do anything with it.
Yeah.
Instead, he's not actually, you know, we talked about him as being, you know, he's very fast, he's very explosive. He obviously doesn't have the world's greatest gas tank. This is the thing, is that once he starts getting into, like, neutral or losing exchanges, he cannot stop himself from burning it all.
Yeah, you're right. That's a very good point. I'll reference a fight that I have referenced for this exact reason many times. The incredible battle between, well, I say incredible battle, it's really more of an incredible performance. More along the lines of an Edwards Usman 3, between, Aaron Pryor and Alexis Arguello. A fight that would not even feel like much of a fight if Alexis Arguello weren't one of the toughest men who ever lived. And that's a fight where, yeah, it is one of the most shockingly relentless pressure performances you will ever see. If people listening have not seen this, it's a boxing match. You will enjoy it. Aaron Pryor puts on, again, just buzzsaw pressure over and over and over, just long combinations, backing Arguello into the ropes, just teeing off for what feels like the entire fight. But the truth is, there there are minutes, 2 minutes at a time at different points where Aaron Pryor is starting to gas. And he feels this, and he gets on his bike. He just will just take a half a round off, or take 2 minutes or a full round off just to recharge. Just using his defense to extend himself and not have to keep fighting at that pace. And this is a very, very valuable sort of trigger to have in your mind, which I think you're absolutely right. Fiziev clearly does not have it. Nor does he apparently have Aaron Pryor's magical water bottle, which was also a thing people will remember from that fight. Who knows what was in it? Cocaine? Amphetamines? Theories abound. But there's long portions before the special water bottle appears very near the end where, Aaron Pryor is clearly gassing from his own work, and he does something about it. He slows down and he goes defensive, and he recharges. And, or if you want to see another boxer who fights tired better than maybe anyone I've ever seen, James Toney. Has some incredible wars, like his fight with, Vasily Jirov is just ridiculous. And both men are dead tired, but James Toney is clearly the more effective fighter when he's tired, because he knows when to sort of buy time and when to just sort of eschew certain ideas of technical boxing to be more efficient. This is a fight where he wants to get in the pocket. He wants to clinch up with Jirov, but he just decides not to stay in his stance to get there. He's I'm just going to walk at him. He's tired. He's not going to surprise me. You know what's the most efficient way of moving around the ring? I'm just going to walk for a minute. And there's a lot of that in James Toney's fights where he just won't waste energy. And when Fiziev is at range with Gaethje in this fight, even when he's at range and there's not strikes flying, he's dynamically hopping from one stance to the other. He's spring loading his weight, preparing to fire a leaping hook off of a slip. He is never at rest. He is never relaxed. And, I think you are spot on that really, really bit him in this fight, even more than it has in any others, that he literally destroys himself.
Yeah. I mean, one of the interesting things is that he does, at the beginning of that third round, did what he did at the end of the RDA fight, which is he actually has a gear of higher speed and power. He deliberately keeps hidden, or the previous fight, and then he just spends it in the last round.
Yep.
He will just suddenly go for it, and he will suddenly try and punch the other guy as hard and fast as he can.
Yeah.
And it worked on RDA, and it damn near worked on Gaethje. Yeah. Then I think what he needed to do after that would be man, I really hurt that guy bad. I can just
coast for a minute.
Coast on, this is winning me the round really easily. Instead, he can't not try and win every exchange.
You're right. Yeah, it made me realize that the sort of irony of the RDA fight is that RDA insisting on ramping up the pressure and making him wrestle defensively probably allowed Fiziev to have his second and third wins in that fight. Cause as much as we hear about, the clinch, and defensive wrestling being very exhausting, they just don't allow Fiziev to waste as much energy as he would if he was at range striking the whole time.
Yes, ironically. Again, he is a wacky ass guy. You see, you're it's so strange to have an MMA fighter and come up with criticisms like too much integrated defense and offense. Body work doesn't work.
Too creative, too flexible.
Gets less tired by wrestling than he does by striking.
Too adaptable. Because he can see all of these great ways deep into a fight to continue mixing things up and staying unpredictable in the exchanges. He just can't keep it up. Yeah. I think
the other side of things,
on the nose.
Justin Gaethje made the adaptations. I mean, I think there was a couple things here that were really won him the fight. I think firstly there was a part in round 2 where, sort of like Usman did in round 2 of his own fight, Gaethje just remembered who he was.
Yeah.
And he Fiziev was throwing a combination, I think, at him, and then he shelled up, bounced the punches off, and then came back with like a series of counters. And he was like, "Oh yeah, this is how Justin Gaethje works. He just hides, and then he comes back and punches them a bunch."
Mm-hmm.
Like suddenly, catch and pitch counters were there, and we saw a lot more like classic Justin Gaethje, who would just wait for the other guy to be near him and then try and bomb him. And yeah, that actually worked quite a lot better. Again, not sure if he won the round, but
Mm-hmm.
was it was a great improvement over round one. And in round 3, he cheated because he started jabbing.
He started jabbing.
And I think if there was any agreement that these two had before
Yeah.
this fight, it was that jabs were for losers.
No jabs. First guy who jabs is a coward. And Gaethje shamed himself for all eternity by just crushing Fiziev with jabs. It was so funny. I don't know that he threw. Certainly, it doesn't stand out. I don't know that he threw a single jab before that round. A couple, he must have thrown a couple. But yeah, he was just out there
You think he did it because he was tired?
Maybe.
Was it an adaptation where it was like, where it was, where he was like, "Oh yeah, this is the best punch I should use, the shortest distance between 2 points," or was he like, "Don't want to step forward.
Maybe. Imagine if
Just want to hit him from here."
Yeah, it was. What did I said last week that he hasn't just become capital T technical. He's become a capital T technical. That he was like a tank turret mounted on a pickup truck. And yeah, it was suddenly like some guy popped out of there with just a rifle. And was just like, "I'm just going to pot shot this dude." And it was incredibly effective. Cannot
Shockingly.
how clean and consistent and reliable that jab was. And it took him, 12 minutes to think to throw it, and then it was just easily just winning him the fight. He put more damage on Fiziev's face in that one round with the jab than in all the insane exchanges and head clashes and everything that came before. Do that from the start, dude. Why aren't you out there jabbing people? It was a good jab. It was stiff. He had his body behind it correctly. He was able to double it up a few times. He was like interrupting and countering Fiziev with it. Why is he not doing that more often if he's able to? It was great.
And that would be the other thing which would also obviously allow Fiziev to preserve his own thing, would be not having to leap into range to punch people the whole time.
Yeah, a jab would be great for Fiziev too.
We've seen, again, this is one of those things where we've seen Justin Gaethje jab people before, namely Tony Ferguson. And we know that he has a good one.
Yeah.
Ever seen Rafael Fiziev jab anyone?
No, not really. Yeah.
I would have been even more shocked if Fiziev had started jabbing him up.
It was just shocking how easily Gaethje started winning the fight once he found that jab. Because again, he had tossed a few out there, but he banked on the jab in that round. He used it for its own sake. Like, oh, this isn't just the setup. This is a punch. And it's a safe, efficient punch. I'm just going to stab this dude in the nose 100 times. And yeah, Fiziev couldn't get away from it. And he couldn't stop running into it because he didn't know how to not just be trying to press into middle range the whole time. I don't know, man. Lightweight is, as much as it is the violence division, it is also the weird dysfunction division. It's like a far superior, but miniature, light heavyweight. All of these athletic monsters out there having just insanely violent wars, but there are still these little flashes of wait, why aren't you making a good decision here? It's hidden more because they're more dynamic and they are broadly much more technical, but there are still just little wrinkles like that in so many of these high-level lightweight fights. You're like, buddy, you should jab. You should have been jabbing the whole fight.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not super interested in seeing Michael Chandler against any of the high-level lightweights anymore. But would be pretty fun to watch him and Fiziev just hyper athletically destroy each other.
That would be great. Michael Chandler,
never stop.
The third round of that fight would be something. Yeah. All right. Well, I don't know how much more there is to say. I mean, it was a phenomenal fight.
I mean, I find it's a shame, I think, in some ways, because I really would have liked to see some new blood at the top. In some ways, much as I love Gaethje, didn't really want to see him defend this one. As in, I wanted to see someone take the new spot. But even though I don't agree with the decision, as we both kind of said, you could tell where the fight was going.
Mm-hmm.
And in most odds, it would have been a 5-round anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I don't feel bad that Fiziev lost.
No, it feels philosophically fine. Now
we're going to get Gaethje Poirier, or something like that, which, I mean, again, will be a sensational, awesome action fight, but it will also lock up significant parts of the top of lightweight for the next 8 months, whilst Tsarukyan has to fight. Tsarukyan, RDA, Oliveira, and Dariush will just fight each other to no avail.
How was aren't Muay Thai rounds 5 minutes? Or are they 3 minutes? I thought they were 5.
I don't remember.
5-minute rounds. I might be wrong about that. Yeah, I'm just looking at Fiziev's record to see when has he ever been asked to extend himself and manage his energy, and all of his Muay Thai decisions are 3-minute rounds, as far as I can tell. I haven't watched a lot of Muay Thai lately, so I might just be wrong about that. I think the best thing that could happen from this is Fiziev is still the younger man. He hasn't taken this kind of punishment in most of his other fights. I would like to think that somebody will get in his ear, or he will come to the conclusion himself and fix this issue. It seems possibly as difficult to overcome because he's so comfortable fighting the way he is as Leon Edwards' issue, but clearly these things are possible. And I think you hit the nail on the head. Really all Fiziev needs to win fights like this is just to recognize when he needs to stop. He needs to know when to quit when he's ahead. And I'm not advising the guy to coast through whole long portions of the fight or just sit on a lead, but know when you are actually going to make yourself lose by continuing to go for it. Every round can't be the first round. You just can't fight like that.
If you were, again, we said it last week, if he was Merab Dvalishvili, could do that.
Yeah, he'd be champion. If he had his skill set with Merab's immortal gas tank, he'd be champion right now. But it's such a consistent pattern that again, these things are genuinely difficult to overcome. I don't blame people for not being able to overcome them, but he would have no one to blame but himself if he comes into his next fight and gasses out in the third round again. Or even if he starts to gas, he needs to stop losing third rounds and getting blown out in third rounds. That is the bad sign.
Just take small wins.
Yeah.
The other thing is that he's someone where it looks very impressive when he hits people.
Yeah.
He would be perfectly capable of winning some Rafael Assunção rounds if he was so inclined.
Yeah, it's not just bullshit either. It is impressive when he hits people. He's super fast. I mean, he hits them clean. Great counters. He has perfect timing on his shots. He just needs to throttle it a little bit. I think that would make a huge difference for him. Because really the only shortcoming of Fiziev is this third round issue. Otherwise, he's a phenomenally complete striker. Even without a jab. That would be the other one. Learn to jab.
Jab would be the other thing.
Learn to jab. Yeah. Now that I think of it, do learn to jab while you're healing up. Okay. Let's take one more break. When we come back, next week's main event between bantamweight contenders, Phil's least favorite fighter in the UFC, Chito Vera, versus everybody's second favorite, Corey Sandhagen, after this.
Financial support is fantastic, but there are other, even easier ways to support Heavy Hands. perhaps the best is by spreading the word. We know our fan base. You're all cool, popular people with serious social media presences. You're tastemakers and trendsetters. Okay, there are one or two of you that don't fit that description. You know who you are, but no matter what, you can always help us out by telling folks about the show. You can also give us a positive rating and review on iTunes and Stitcher, things like that. We rely on word of mouth and positive feedback to grow and improve, so thank you very much for your time and your help. Now, back to the show.
All right, folks, welcome back to Heavy Hands. We have a Fight Night main event still ahead of us. That is Marlon Chito Vera versus Corey Sandhagen. And, Phil? Describe your emotional state heading into this fight. Resigned.
Yeah. As I think I said, when the fight was booked, or just like when we were giving this like a hypothetical? We know what's going to happen. Corey Sandhagen is going to smoke Marlon Vera for 4 rounds as Vera plods around the cage after him. And then on the tail end of a minus 400 strike differential, Chito's going to land 1 punch, and Sandhagen's head will go and probably flying off into the crowd, and that'll be the end of it.
Yeah. Do you really think that's what's going to happen?
It's what I'm fearing.
Yeah, you fear
Sadness edging it now.
Right. Yeah, I'm not so, I think this might be the end of Chito's style, improbably working. That is kind of my feeling.
Yeah, we've thought that before, though.
Did we? Who was it?
Always account for the fact that some people are simply blessed by the gods with literally infinite stats in one particular category.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, if you look at, you just look at the Cruz fight and you're like, what if Dominic Cruz, hit harder, was more comfortable striking, and wasn't 100 years old and on his 8th set of knees?
He wouldn't have even needed to hit harder or any of the other things. If he had...
because hitting harder is pointless. Yes, you are correct.
Right. If he had 70% of Chito's chin and everything else was exactly the same, he would very clearly have won that fight. It was just that every time he got touched on the chin, his legs folded up on themselves and he just collapsed. Yeah. But, so it happened to Rob Font. Wasn't the first time we saw somebody do that to Rob Font. It was, in fact, immediately after Jose Aldo doing a far cleaner version of it. And then it happened to Dominic Cruz, again, an increasingly fragile fighter we have seen finished just before that. Corey Sandhagen offers a lot of the difficulties that Dominic Cruz did and Rob Font did. He's mobile, he's accurate, he is a better and more fluid combination puncher than either of them, I think. Certainly compared to Rob Font, he has a little more of the phase blending transitional skills of Dominic Cruz. But again, arguably better. Cruz has his one switch up really. And he has some trickiness with the low kicks, plays off of his level changes and his combinations. But, what really happened in that fight is that at some point, Chito kind of got a read on the 2 Dominic Cruz entries and started to punish them. Sandhagen, has shown multiple times now in his last few fights that, he's really tactically flexible. That he will come in with an adjustment that is either a specific adaptation to the person in front of him or a specific lesson learned in his last fight, or both, and put it to use with great discipline and poise. And he's also younger, and he is himself insanely tough. He's not Chito Vera, but I don't think Dominic Cruz would have needed Chito's exact chin to win that fight, or Rob Font. They just would have needed...
There is a significant gap between those two men, and Corey Sandhagen
exactly
has been badly hurt that I can think of, twice in his MMA career, and like, well, I mean, actually badly hurt once.
Yeah.
Which was his first fight against
the Alcantara fight.
Yeah, Alcantara. I mean, John Lineker obviously got to him, but it was in a very sort of Cheeto kind of way, where he was just like, this is unpleasant, rather than as all freakishly durable people are. That's when you know you're seeing someone who has, some physical gifts, is when they're up against a massive puncher and the puncher's just landing huge shots on them.
Yeah.
Their reaction is to go like, "Quit it!" And they just get this to their body language, just like, "Stop it! It's really annoying."
Yeah.
Don't like it at all.
And then he got...
Whereas most people's reaction would be, to go flat on their back and stare up at the ceiling for several minutes.
Yeah. Yeah, Cheeto getting hit by, like, John Lineker is like somebody getting stung by a bee. Ugh. A mosquito just bit me.
Yeah.
Yeah, Sandhagen got dropped the once, I think, by Petr Yan and staggered on another occasion. He was briefly staggered in that fight with Song Yadong. And basically instantly recovered and didn't even have to go into any kind of shell or anything. He just, the moment Song tried to follow up, he just ran him into a hard shot and went back to winning. He is durable and he recuperates and recovers very well. And, yeah, he's just like, he's young. So, like, he's young and he hasn't just been destroyed yet. He did get ultimately outpunched by Petr Yan. That was, I think, the decisive difference between those two that won Petr Yan the fight. It was also Yan recognizing that in a very determined and consistent way. And just...
So it was Yan stepping in a way which Chito Vera does not much.
The thing that frustrates you, I suspect, and which I can sympathize with about Chito Vera's game is that it appears hugely dysfunctional. That, like, the number of times that he just, against both Font and Cruz, that he just, like, saw strikes coming and just sort of, like, swatted at them and just skittered backwards in a straight line. The length of time it took him to actually start landing counters off of this bad defense. Yeah, like, it comes a point in these fights in, like, round 4 where Chito looks to me like actually a pretty good, like, pressure fighting, aggressive counter striker. But it takes him a long time to get there. And everything up to that point is, it can be quite, like, lackadaisical and lazy.
Yeah, it's like watching someone learn how to fight from scratch.
Right. Every time. So my read going in is I mean, this means nothing based on my recent picks, but I pretty confidently favor Corey Sandhagen to be a level of a kind of matchup Chito has won recently that is just like maybe a rude awakening for Chito.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of have to agree, all the memes aside. Yeah, I mean, Chito is so frustrating because obviously he has improved so much from his early career, but in a way which makes him, like, whilst, it has been revealed that he is, an immortal.
Yeah.
Whilst having, like, he's built ways to win fights whilst building 0 round winning process whatsoever.
He had a better round winning process before this most recent run. It's almost like he was having to learn, and then he figured out that no one can kill him.
Yeah.
And if anything, I think his process has degraded in his last few fights.
Yeah, I think that's what is I found so incredibly frustrating, is that his process has degraded whilst his technical ability has increased in some ways.
Yeah.
Because one of the big criticisms we used to have Chito Vera is he didn't have a ranged weapon.
Yep.
But, like, you're like, what does Chito Vera do when he's standing at range with people? He still does stand there doing nothing a lot of the time, but he actually just has, like, a really nice, really dangerous, very powerful jab now.
Yep. And
just flick it out. He just doesn't do it for the first however long.
He's got a great straight right hand. He's got an excellent...
Still a very powerful low kicker, which was his only substitute as a ranged weapon back in the day.
Yep, and he also loves that front kick now, too, that straight front kick.
Yeah. So, at his best, he is just, a balanced, dangerous, again, functionally immortal striker with, who's developed, with all this stuff, has developed massive punching power. Or at least, I
think he's always been I was saying this way back in the day. I was like, I think Chito Vera hits really hard, and he just does not harness that as well as confidently as he should be.
Yeah, but now he doesn't just hit, I think, naturally hard. Now he hits good.
Yeah.
He has weight transfer, and he doesn't need to... he doesn't actually need to oversell on his punches, which makes it, as I said, all the more frustrating that he tends to spend giant swathes of time doing absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
If he does this to Corey Sandhagen, I just expect Corey Sandhagen to do the same thing to him that he did to Song Yadong. Song Yadong and Chito met in the center of the cage pretty much and had an amazing, tremendous war. And then Sandhagen just took him apart. Yadong waited on him, and Corey took angles, took small victories, and then just moved away until Song got frustrated and started getting hit by bigger things until he got TKO'd in the end, right?
I don't think so.
Due to the orbital break.
Was that
not? I don't remember.
Oh yeah, it was. I forgot it was a between round stoppage between rounds 4 and 5.
Yeah.
I had it in my mind as just a decision that just got stronger and stronger, but yeah, he actually took him out. Slowly built on him and took him out.
Yeah, and that is one of the ways that you can beat people who are, unknockoutable, is that you can make them unable to see.
Break things.
Or break parts of them.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, it's just really hard to see Sandhagen, if not just outright getting better over the course of the fight, at least just racking up rounds early due to Vera's inactivity. I'm curious to see if he can pick up takedowns on Chito. Again, I think, technically speaking, Chito is a much better takedown defender than he used to be.
Yeah, man, it certainly speaks to his ability to just slowly build into the fight and gain confidence and awareness that after getting surprised with a few takedowns early by both Frankie Edgar and Dominic Cruz, he was stuffing them expertly as the fight went on.
Absolutely. And those takedowns that hit him were really good takedowns.
Yeah.
They were very well set up, very sneaky takedowns, which you wouldn't discredit anyone for getting hit by those.
Yeah, that was an adaptation that Sandhagen brought into the Song Yadong fight. He really leaned on his wrestling more, but he also didn't fight in such a way that he needed to complete them. He had ways to work off of them and to build them into his striking. He also brought the crashing elbow counters that we wished we'd seen from him against Yan, where he used all this circular movement and poking sort of long-range weaponry to goad Song Yadong into increasingly desperate lunges. And then I think that's probably what broke the orbital, is he just ran him into an elbow. So yeah, the ability to mix up all of these specific adaptations is, again, clearly something that Dominic Cruz was able to trouble Chito Vera with in the early going. He's just an old man.
I mean, pretty much, not just the early going, just the whole fight.
Honestly, yeah, he was still winning the vast majority of the exchanges. The takedowns stopped working. So I don't know. I mean, guaranteed Chito is going to hurt Sandhagen at some point in this fight, right? He's increasingly difficult to scare and frustrate, although people have too quickly forgotten that Jose Aldo fight, where Aldo just banked the early rounds and then just got a takedown and Cheeto was just like mad and couldn't figure out how to win. Like, there are actual costs to just allowing yourself to be put into a massive deficit every fight. And at a certain level, a complete lack of strategy is sort of just like Zen awareness or belief that at some point the win will drop into your lap isn't going to cut it. And yeah, I just think Sandhagen is too consistent, too solid, too good at recovering. And
I mean, again, it's one of those fights where, like, mad at Cheeto because I like him.
Yeah.
Liked him. Like, it would be great to see him synthesize, like, early aggression with his current technical kit.
Yeah.
He just comes out there and he's working the jab from the beginning. No, he's working jabs and low kicks. He's finding ways to negotiate into range rather than just being like, I'm going to let Corey Sandhagen come in and then I'm going to figure out what it is that he's doing and then I'm going to take his head off for doing it.
Yeah. That's the thing is, like Edwards Usman, this could be a very winnable or at least an easily competitive fight for Cheeto. It does not have to look like the Font and Cruz fights.
Yeah, he's one of the few people who can get close to matching Sandhagen for his frame.
Yep.
As said, I think he's probably still a bigger puncher. He's still more durable.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
Absolutely. But yeah, it's just one of those ones where I just can't trust him to do it.
He's just, after starting his career as a very specific kind of head case, it's crazy that he's changed so much, but he's just sort of morphed back into a different kind of head case. Like, somehow he's arrived back where he started as the guy who just cannot get going until well into the fight. But with
head kicks old people.
But with a completely different attitude about how he gets there.
Yeah.
Now he's just like calm. He's like, I'm going to kill you eventually. But like he has come full circle into just a more confident version of the guy who is like guaranteed to lose the first 2 rounds of a 5-round fight. Weird. A weird transformation only to end up back where he started. Yeah, I think it could easily, with a couple adjustments, with a certain mindset shift, which Cheeto has done before against certain opponents. He has been super aggressive out of the gate and has been really committed to putting combinations together and working the body. He is a great body puncher when he has a mind to be. We have seen those fights from Cheeto. But it's been a bit...
It's just that every time we've seen Sandhagen, he's been...
Yeah.
He's been someone where you have to say... He's impressed me with his level of strategic.
Yeah.
It's been above and beyond the level of strategic adjustment you expected.
Yeah.
And every time we've seen Cheeto lately, it's been like, oh man, I guess you won that, but
yeah. How? What happened? You won that fight with 3 discrete moments and did very little else that was even good. Yeah, Sandhagen is up there in terms of a thinking man's fighter on the tier of like, fought last weekend, one of my favorite guys to watch, Jack Shore. Just a super well-rounded guy who is more capable than the vast majority of athletes to add new tools and to make like specific strategies for his opponents. And Cheeto seems devoid of that kind of thoughtfulness. He really does. It's
You know what? This discussion has actually ruined this fight for me now, because before I was ready.
Yeah, now you have hope.
I had resigned myself to the fact that Sandhagen was going to rack up massive strike differentials en route to getting his head ripped off.
Yeah.
Now I've convinced myself he's actually just going to win.
It's
going to make it once again. It's going to be me screaming at the Ellie curse you Cheeto like Skeletor.
And it really could happen. I mean, for all of it really could happen. That Cheeto he could lose so much of the fight and still win. He could lose more of a fight before winning than ever before. This looks like
it's going to be his magnum opus.
Right. How little can I win and still walk away with the official victory? And several of Corey Sandhagen's teeth embedded in my hand. Yeah, could happen. I'm not denying it. I think even like just seeing what we've seen out of Cheeto, I would even say it's reasonably likely that he loses long portions of this fight and still walks away with a win. But I have a lot more faith in Sandhagen than I do in the chronically fragile old Dominic Cruz and Rob Font to weather what is otherwise a really inconsistent anti-round winning style from Chito Vera. Sometimes you got to win the rounds.
Sometimes.
We think.
Maybe.
Maybe. All right. Well, that'll do it for this week's Heavy Hands. I guess I'll plug my article because it was the first one I've written in some time. I think it still holds up after the fact. I wrote an article called What is Wrong with Leon Edwards? I talked about his footwork. I talked about how he adjusted to his footwork limitations by learning to step into the clinch on people. And then I talked about sort of my favorite topic, why do people fight the way they fight? What are their intangible limitations? And, I made the very simple but somehow very prescient determination that he really just needed to not back up against Kamaru Usman and he could probably win much more comfortably, which he did. So go check that out.
Right.
Go check that out. What is Wrong with Leon Edwards? I was pretty happy with it. I think you'll probably enjoy it. I hope so anyway. Check out. Thank you, Phil. Thank you. Check out our Patreon, patreon.com/heavyhands. No bonus episode this week, but we did have two the prior 2 weeks, which you may still enjoy. They're both pretty long. Find us on Twitter @EvilGregJackson. That's Phil. @BoxingBush. That's me. And until next week, when we will be discussing the aftermath of Sandhagen Vera, and also probably looking forward 2 weeks in advance to the quite stacked undercard of UFC 287, Pereira versus Adesanya. Do we call it Pereira Adesanya 2 or Pereira Adesanya 5?
Is it 5? Are we up to 5?
If you include their kickboxing bouts, they fought 3 times, didn't they? Or just twice?
Yeah, you're right.
Or just twice. Am I wrong?
Twice. Because, it was one decision win. Their third match was the fake rubber match, because Pereira was up 2, even though he didn't.
So it's either 2 or 4 if you're willing to jump across the boundaries of sports. But anyway, it's a shockingly stacked pay-per-view card. I think even compared to the last 2 pay-per-views, it's really pretty loaded top to bottom, so we may have a rare opportunity to talk about some fights well before they get canceled the week of the event. Anyway, until then, thanks all for listening. And if you came here today for the finer points of face punching, you came to the right place. This has been Heavy Hands.